All right, the Memorial Day walk down memory lane is over. Talking about all the quarterbacks of the past and, whatever we talked about yesterday. What quarterbacks were people most excited about, and which quarterbacks did this and did that. Shout out to our guy, the Pitt Jedi Master, for saying it was encyclopedic. I don't know about that. I have more blank spots than interesting data points. I'll tell you that. Sometimes when I try and think back on memories over the years from Pitt games, sometimes they run together. There's some that stand out, some I can still see clear as day. I often tell that story about LaShawn McCoy before the 2008 Notre Dame game, jogging around in his torn up Superman t-shirt and thinking, boy, I wonder if that memory will be relevant. And it ended up being as that game proceeded. But I said we're not going to go down memory lane today. Today is all about this season. It's all about this year's Pitt football team. And it's a continuation of our conversation about quarterbacks from yesterday. It's a continuation of really what we're talking about all week this week on Panther-Lair.com as we break down the quarterback position. But it's putting the question of quarterback into the context of the rest of the team. Because it's a question I touched on yesterday, and I said I was going to talk about this today, and I am. And it's a question of, is the quarterback position the biggest question mark facing Pitt this season? And so I wrote down every question I could think of. What are the questions facing this team? The things are ultimately going to decide the season. You don't know. Yes or no, good or bad. What are they going to be? And there were 10 questions I came up with. And where did I put quarterback on that list of 10? I didn't put it at number 1. I'll say that. I didn't put it at number 1. And I didn't put it at number 2 or number 3 or so on down the list. It didn't go to number 10. It didn't fall that far down the list, but it's not in the top half. I'll tell you that. So let's talk about those 10 big questions. What are the biggest questions facing Pitt this season? Where does the quarterback position line up in it? Let's have a good post-Memorial Day conversation and talk about how Pitt's quarterbacks, you like the fireworks? How Pitt's quarterbacks figure into the team this season, if they're the biggest question mark facing the team, or where they rank among the top 10 questions facing the team. Here on the Morning Pitt on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I was trying to remember how to do the confetti, and I thought it was the 2 thumbs up, but the 2 thumbs up were the fireworks. There you go. I got the confetti, though. You see me brought it in. It's the double peace signs. Give you the confetti. I was trying to do that one, but I ended up with fireworks. That's fun. That's a good time. It was a holiday weekend. There's sometimes fireworks on holiday weekends. I don't know if fireworks are necessarily associated with Memorial Day, but I don't know if confetti is either, and the laser show or any of those other things we like to do, the balloons that we like to drop in there. But anyway, you know the deal here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's our Pitt video channel where we put out Pitt video content every Pitt video day of the week. We start your day with these morning Pitt videos. You get your morning shave, your morning shower, and your morning Pitt. Give you a little bit of Pitt sports talk to start your day, and then we move on. We have other stuff. We have our weekly live show that we do every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. With me and Jim Hammett. That's always fun. We've got our we have we have press conferences and interviews and post-game shows and all kinds of things like that. And it's all right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're just listening to the audio podcast and you're like, oh, I don't need to hear that promo because I'm not watching the videos. Well, the reality is you should be watching the videos, and it'd be a whole lot cooler if you did. And don't forget the website, Panther-Lair.com, where we're doing all of our QB week, our quarterback week preview content. It's less than 10 weeks until the start of training camp. And so we're counting it down position by position, not counting it down. We're going position by position and breaking down the positions. You can see we had the 5 big questions about the quarterbacks today. We're going to break down the personnel who left the roster this offseason, who joined the roster this offseason at the quarterback position, and we're going to move forward from there. So check it out, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. So here's 10 questions I thought of. The 10 biggest questions facing Pitt this season. I want to figure out where the quarterback position stacks up among these 10, all right? So here are the 10, in no order. Here are the 10 biggest questions. The quarterback position, the wide receiver position. I'm not just going to say every position. That's not it. Like quarterback position, can Nate Yarnell take what he did in 2 games and extend it out to 12 games or 13 games? Like if you take his 2-game sample size, against Boston College and Duke, and you put that over 13 games, he throws for like 3,000 yards, 20 touchdowns, like 8 interceptions, and he completes 67% of his passes. He would have led the ACC in passing in completion percentage last year. He would have been one of only 4 quarterbacks in the conference to throw at least 20 touchdowns, and none of them would have had that few, or only one out of those 4 had fewer than 9 interceptions, and that was Jordan Travis. So Nate Arnell, if he could take what he did in those 2 games and expand it out to 13, he'll be one of the best quarterbacks in the conference, or at least he'll have one of the best stat lines. Can he do that? That's one of the big questions facing the team this year. Wide receiver. Like you've heard me say this a bajillion times. Who's the number 1 wide receiver? Is there a guy who can be that number 1 wide receiver that Bub Means, I think, flirted with last season, but nobody has really been since Jordan Addison in 2021. Do they have somebody to do that? Offensive line depth. Again, another one I've talked about a lot. I'm okay with that top 5. I think that starting 5 should be solid, but the depth behind those guys has me really questioning. I'm really concerned. The defensive end position, totally unproven. No real production to speak of. Nothing on these guys' resumes says, oh, they're going to be really good this year. They might be, but they just haven't been to this point in their career, either due to opportunity or just not producing when given the opportunity. Defensive tackle position, kind of the same thing. A whole bunch of unknowns. 2 years after Kalaji Kancey left and became a first-round draft pick, 1 year after losing 3 sixth-year seniors and another fifth-year senior who transferred. So there's some big holes there, and you have a lot of inexperience in youth trying to fill it. The young linebackers, that I'm bullish on those guys. I'm really high on the young linebackers, but where are they really going to be? You know what I mean? Are they going to be good enough to? Are they going to be good enough? Yeah, I mean, like, certainly on this podcast and these videos, we have been guilty at points of overhyping outside linebackers, particularly guys who don't have a ton of playing time, but they look like $1 million, and you think, boy, that guy is built like an NFL player. We did that a lot. We did that a lot last year. We did that enough that I convinced people that Bengali Kamara was the best player on the team entering the season. He did not play like the best player on the team. I don't know who was the best player on the team. That's actually an interesting conversation for another day. I mean, Donovan McMillan, because he had like 100 tackles. Who was the best player on the team? Now, see, this is how I get sidetracked. It's like now that's stuck in my brain, and I'm like, who was the best player on the team last year? And I mean, like, it's one of those things where it's hard to pick someone. It's hard to find anything nice to say about a team that went 3-9 and the players that made up the roster that went 3-9. So it's tough to say, it's tough to say anything nice about him, to be quite honest. So it's hard to find any positives of who was the best player on the team. But I don't have an obvious answer. I don't think there's an easy, obvious answer. Do you? Shane Simon or somebody? McMillan? Like McIntyre, Marquez Williams? Is there anybody on offense that you would put in that conversation? Nate Arnell for 2 games? So, see, I got sidetracked. This is what happens. But the young linebackers, look, I'm really high on those guys, but they have to actually prove it. And you could say, well, what's the difference between them and Kenny Johnson? I don't know. I keep bringing up Johnson's lack of experience or lack of production or lack of resume. But for some reason, I feel far more bullish on the linebackers than I do on the young wide receivers who haven't proven anything or proven about as much as the linebackers. Although, to be fair, I think Braylon Lovelace has as many touchdowns as Kenny Johnson does. So maybe there's a little bit more there. Obviously, the new corners, there are big question marks there. How are those guys going to do? Those guys who are taking over for Marquez Williams, MJ Devonshire, and AJ Woods. It's sort of a mixed bag of candidates. It's Rylan Gandy, it's Rashad Battle, it's Tamon Lynam, it's Tamarian Crumpley, it's Noah Bigelow. Somebody's got to emerge there, and they should be able to find 2 or 3 or 4 guys to rotate through there. I just don't know who they're going to be, and I don't know how they're going to play. And then, of course, there's the punter situation, which you could pretty much you could pick any game, you could throw a dart and find a game that had a really bad punt. I remember I was looking at Nate Yarnell when he like his one interception that he threw in those final 2 games. He threw it at Duke, and it was like part of this sequence, like right around this sequence where, or actually no, that was late in the game, but near the end of the first half against Duke, Pitt gave up, like Duke had like a 25-yard scoring drive. And it's because of how bad Caleb Junko's punt was. And that happened multiple times. That's not... That wasn't the entire reason they lost games last year, but it was a big, big problem and not something they've addressed in the offseason. You know, unless they have an in-house option, I don't really know that they've addressed the problem and improved it. So maybe they're just counting on Caleb Junko to get better. That seems like a tall ask. Not because I don't think the kid is talented, but I mean, he really struggled last year. So that's a big question. And then we move to the sidelines. And real big question about the offensive coordinator. You know, is it going to work? I mean, this is a simple question. And it's a question that I think can be answered pretty simply. And I don't think we're going to need much, elaboration or caveats or, anything like that. It's just like, is this going to work? It worked at Western Carolina. It worked at Valdosta State and Tusculum. Great. But is it going to work in the ACC? Is it going to work at Pitt? Is it going to work this season? Is it going to work with these players? Is it going to work against the teams they're going to face? Is it going to work? And that's a big question that encompasses a lot. Like I know I just said, well, we don't need many caveats or anything like that. I mean, there are a lot of little sort of like tentacles out of that. I mean, yeah, there's Cade Bell and the play calling, the game planning, and this general design of the system. But, I mean, you need the quarterback to play well. You need the receivers to excel. You need the O-line to stay healthy. You need the running backs to, you need all of those things clicking. But when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, when we get through 12 games or 13 games or however many Pitt plays, and we sit and we look back and we say, did the offense work? It's going to be a yes or no question. Now, if you watch these videos for long enough, you know that I end up, mealy-mouthing my way around most of these kinds of things. Well, like on the surface, yeah, no, there was this, but then you have to consider this and that. And look, if we change this and we change that, I mean, by God, people, last week, I just told you about how Nate Yarnell was like top 5 in every passing category in the ACC if you bring the sample size down to 70 dropbacks. So I could pretty much talk my way out of or into or around anything. So I'm sure when we get to the end of the season and I look back and I say, did the offense work? The answer is going to be, yeah, but, or no, but. I mean, I spent an entire offseason after the 2018 season debating whether it was a success or a failure, whether it was a success to win the Coastal Division or a failure to go 7-7. And I typically tended towards success, probably because a lot of people were saying failure. It's just what I do. So I'm sure I'm not going to have a definitive answer by the end of the year, but we should be able to look at it and say, either by the numbers or just by what we saw, yeah, that offense worked or it didn't. Now, that's a big question facing the team this year. And then another question, kind of along those lines, and this is the 10th one, does Pat Narduzzi have the stomach for this offense? Like, will Pat Narduzzi allow this offense to be what Cade Bell wants it to be? There may be limitations of quarterback. There may be limitations at wide receiver or running back or offensive line. There may be personnel limitations. There may be, whatever that may crop up there. But will Cade Bell get interference from Pat Narduzzi about what he wants to do? Let's count down these questions, all right, because we're going to start there. All right, 1 through 10. We're going to count it down 10 through 1. And I'm looking at it, we're almost like 15 minutes into this. I think we'll count down 10 through 5 today, and tomorrow, or 10 through 6, and tomorrow we'll do the 5 biggest questions facing the team. So this is the second 5 biggest questions facing the team. Number 10, out of that whole group, the least question, the smallest question I have, the least impactful question I have, is that one I just said. I think whatever you want to say about Pat Narduzzi and whatever we want to say about his philosophy and what he believes and whether he's caught in the Stone Age or it's Big Ten football or he just wants to run or this or that, Pat Narduzzi, I think, has largely been almost entirely hands-off with his offensive coordinators in 9 years at Pitt. And there may be really count on one hand number of instances where he truly meddled in the offense. Really. And I mean, like, as evidence of that, I point to the first 5 games last year. Who in their right mind could have watched those first 5 games and said, no, this is good. This is good. This is the path we want to be on. This is good stuff right here. Because, as I've said, and you've probably said, and we've all said many times, Pat Narduzzi may profess to know nothing about offense, and that's fine. That's fine. That's not his area of expertise. I applaud him for deferring to those he views to be experts in the field. But, if you see lousy quarterback play, like I can tell it, you can tell it, everybody in the stadium can tell it. You've watched enough football, you've coached enough football, you've studied enough football to know that sucks. That's bad football. Right? Like, there's no way Pat Narduzzi went through those first 5 games not knowing, not being aware of how bad it was. And he still let it go on until after the 5th game when he stepped in. And this is one of the few instances, I think, over the last 9 years where Narduzzi did meddle, where he did step in and say, enough is enough. Enough is enough. We've got to do something here. I'm told in 2020, the COVID year, after the Notre Dame game, remember that disaster was like 45-3 or something like that, and Paris Ford left the team, and everything seemed to be falling apart, and they had a bye week, so you could stew about it for 2 weeks, but they couldn't go on the road because it was, there was no recruiting stuff. And I'm told that at that point, Narduzzi went to Mark Whipple and the offensive staff and said, look, I don't know that he necessarily meddled, but I think he said, I want to know everything that we're doing. I want to know why we're doing it. I want you to show me tendencies. I want you to show me play calls. I want as much data as you can possibly give me about the first however many games of the season. I want to find out why what we're doing is just not working. Now, you could make a case that maybe the offense wasn't the biggest problem that Pitt had at that particular point in time, but it was certainly one of them. And I think that's one of the few times. He does not meddle. And as much as we want to talk about, Narduzzi couldn't stand Whipple's offense, that might be the case. You can point out how he, has brought up that they didn't run the ball enough against Wake Forest in the ACC championship game. And yeah, he said that. He's made multiple comments to that, in that direction. But he didn't do it during the game. He didn't yell at Whipple, why aren't we running the ball more? I mean, to my knowledge, maybe he did, and Whipple just told him to shove it. But year after year, he has allowed his coordinators to call the offense that they want to call and run the offense. I think Narduzzi views his role in the offense as being the guy who selects the coordinator. He hires the coordinator to be the head coach of the offense, and then he lets him do it. So I don't have any question about Pat Narduzzi being able to stomach this offense. I think he'll be, it might drive him crazy at times, and it likely will drive him crazy at times, but he's going to let Cade Bell call the offense that he wants to call, for better or for worse. And I think there's enough evidence, over 9 years, unless Narduzzi, he already did a complete 180 in hiring Cade Bell to begin with, but unless he does a 180 in how he approaches the offensive coordinator, I think he'll continue to let the OC do what he wants to do this year as well. All right, number 9 on the list, out of that list of the 10 biggest questions, number 9 for me is the young linebackers. I'm gaga about these guys. I really am. Braylon Lovelace, Rasheem Biles, Jordan Bass, Kyle Lewis. I'm counting him in that group because he's inexperienced as well. I think those 4 guys are going to be really, really good. They're really good. And I think they're going to be really good this year. I think there's a lot of excitement about them. I think they're, the coaches are pumped up about them. I think the older players are excited about them. I think they're going to be really good. And then you throw in like the veterans, like, Brandon George and Key Thompson, and there's your 2 deep with one hell of a mix of veteran experienced guys and young guys who are hungry and athletic and fast and physical. I don't have a lot. I'm not worried about the linebackers. I think the linebackers are going to be pretty good. And I tell you what, this is a blind faith one, but number 8 on the biggest questions is the young corners. or the inexperienced corners, I should say, because guys like Rashad Battle have been around for a while. I'm just not too concerned. I mean, like, we were all excited about the recruiting when those guys were landed and when they were signed. We were excited about the Pitt coaches getting those guys. I don't, I think I think they've been right about the corners that they've gotten over the years. And so I'm kind of inclined to believe that they're going to, be able to roll another group out there. Yeah, Williams and Woods and Devonshire were around for a long time, but they've recruited that position well. I think they're going to be able to roll guys out there and play well. I mean, some of it will depend on the pressure they get up front, and obviously we're going to have more questions about that coming up. But I just have a little bit of blind faith based on the recruiting, based on the track record of development. I think they're going to be all right. I think they'll be okay. Number 7 on my biggest questions is quarterback. I really think Nate Yarnell is going to be at least average and probably above average. I do. The more I've looked at some of these numbers and just what he did, and again, it's only Boston College and Duke, but who are they playing this year? They'll face a couple good defenses, but it's not like they're playing a ton of teams that are of such significantly higher caliber than Boston College and Duke were last year. I think they were both bowl teams, right? So, that's you're facing a lot of teams along, at that level this year. And Nate Yarnell was able to do that in a really difficult situation with Frank Cignetti as the offensive coordinator. I think he can do, this year with the confidence of being the starter, with all this time working as the starter and having this experience on the field. I think he's gonna do well. I don't know if it'll end up being 20 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. I don't know if he'll complete 67% of his passes, but I think he's a pretty smart kid. I think he's a very efficient quarterback. And I think he'll be able to make plays and take care of the football and get the ball where it's supposed to go. So I'm actually kind of confident about him. And then number 6, I put the punter, not because I don't have my concerns about Caleb Junko. I certainly do. It's just offense and defense are going to trump that. You know what I mean? Your concerns about offense and your concerns about defense are always going to be bigger than your concerns about special teams. Even if you have the, most concerning special team situation imaginable, a concern on offense or a concern on defense is always going to trump it because those guys are on the field a ton more and they have a much bigger impact on the game. Now, the punter can impact the game, and we saw that in the negative way last year quite a bit. But I'm still going to defer to the offense and the defense. I think that's where, that's where the biggest impact comes from. So, yes, Caleb Junko is a concern. The punter position is a concern, but I put it at number 6 on my list of the 10 biggest questions facing Pitt this season. So, number 10, whether Pat Narduzzi will allow Cade Bell to run his offense. Number 9, the young linebackers. Number 8, the new corners. Number 7, the quarterback, whether Nate Yarnell can be average or above and carry over what he did in 2 games last year. And then number 6, the punter situation. Those are my the bottom 5 of my top 10 biggest questions facing Pitt this year. Tomorrow, let's get to the top 5 questions. You know what's left: the wide receiver situation, the offensive line depth, the defensive ends, the defensive tackles, and Cade Bell's offense. Will it work? Those are the top 5 in some order, not in that order. We'll give you that order tomorrow. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you don't miss that video tomorrow or any of the videos we put out here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. And then check out the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com is the YouTube channel. Subscribe here, like this video, all those things. Thanks for tuning in today. I appreciate it. I hope you had a good Memorial Day yesterday. Back to the grind today. Enjoy your Tuesday. We'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.